Hi, my name is Shanice Chantel. I'm from Central Arkansas, and I had a 20-minute near-death experience. I am a mother of three girls, aged 20, 4, and 5. I know you're probably saying, wow, that's a big gap. And yeah, you're right. But that leads me right into my story. In 2018, 16 years later, I had a baby girl, and it was very surprising, and I was much nervous to the point as how was life going to be like having a baby 16 years later. And then soon after that, I was pregnant again in 2019. So my OBGYN, she convinced me to get a tubal ligation, and I didn't know too much about it, but it kind of sounded good because at this point my family would have been complete. Women that I've talked to says that it only took 20 minutes. Just the best decision that they ever made. And so, and I was very active and healthy, jumping out of airplanes, climbing mountains, very, very active. So I didn't see any reason why my experience would be any different. So I opted in for a tubal ligation, which some people know it as getting your tubes tied after childbirth. On July the 19th, 2019 is when I went into labor, but I didn't deliver until the following day. So right after I delivered baby girl, I went into the operating room, and that's when I had the tubal ligation. Surgery was supposed to take 20 minutes, but I estimated about an hour and 20 minutes. Not sure why, but it did take that long. I was wheeled out, and soon after, I kept having stomach pain. So my abdomen was hurting, and I kept saying that my stomach is hurting. And the doctor nurse was like, it's just gas, it's after childbirth symptoms. And I went on with that, but I knew it was something different other than gas. So day two is when I had a rapid response. My oxygen level was decreasing, my blood pressure was going crazy, and I ended up fainting. So at this point, it alerted the doctors and nurses that maybe she's experienced something other than gas pain. So it led them to do a little bit of investigation. End up getting a NG tube and feeding tube because at this point I was curled up in a fetal position because I was just in so much pain. And it also prompted, and I stopped eating and I wasn't having bowel movement or passing gas. And so the doctor ended up doing a CT scan. Well, the CT scan showed that it was normal, and that really discouraged me because I knew I wasn't imagining these pains. And I knew I couldn't get up and walk. I mean, I was so much pain. So I made it to day 6, still in the hospital, wasn't able to go home. The newborn was sent to her first time dad. The 1 year old, almost 1 year old at the time, was being taken care of by my 16-year-old. And so on the 6th day, I became really, really hot. Like someone has literally poured gasoline inside of me and like lit a match. I was that type of hot. This really alarmed my family, and they just had enough at this point because I supposed to be getting better, but things were getting worse. So my mother told the nurse that they should look into an infection. The nurse told the doctor stated, well, I'll look into her symptoms the following morning because he was no longer at the hospital. My mom told the nurse, hey, call that doctor, any doctor, somebody need to see about my child because my mother knew by looking into my eyes that I was getting tired and I may not make it. So the doctor ordered a CT scan, and that showed fecal matter, and that prompted emergency exploratory surgery. So this was like the second time going into the operating room because my first time was having my tubes tied. And within the operating room, the surgeon found a hole within the bowel as well as several abscesses. After that, I was wheeled out with a wound vac and several drainages, and I went into CCU. And culture revealed I had 3 deadly infections. I had sepsis, and then at that point, I was also vomiting up my bowel. I had staph, and I had a different other killer infection. So that prompted them to go ahead and do antibiotics. So at this point, it's a race against time because my organs are starting to fail, my heart, my lungs, my kidneys. So they're doubling up on antibiotics as well as pain meds, morphine. They use fentanyl, oxy, whatever it was to go ahead to try to get ahead of this thing. And so on my birthday, I was in a regular room at this point because I must have been showing some signs of improvement. On my birthday, I was rushed into CCU because I couldn't breathe. So I was having an anxiety attack, but also my lungs was failing. So the doctor said that I had congestive heart failure, renal failure, and upper respiratory failure. Basically, you're about to die. So it was no cake and ice cream on this birthday or jumping out of an airplane. Then I finally made it to the floor and I had double pneumonia in both my lungs. After that, I ended up having severe nosebleeds and end up having 2 blood transfusions. And then a month and a half in, I was just so ready to go home. A nurse told me, Shanice, you got to advocate for yourself. And so I advocated for myself, like the nurse said, and went through all my doctors. I had like 7 at this point, and they all gave me the go ahead that I was going to go home the following day. So I was really excited because in my mind, I was ready. I didn't know if my body was, but I was ready. And so got the go ahead that I was going to go home. My family at the hospital, we praising God, we having a good time. And my sister said to herself, or said to me, she was like, I see you in the morning, because she was going to come back and get me because I was being discharged. So by the time she made it from the hospital to her driveway, she get a frantic call to come back because I flatlined. And what happened with that, in the process of me flatlining, I end up getting 5 shocks. And before that, the rapid response, my heart was skipping rhythm. And so it prompted like rapid response. And then by the time they got in there, my heart went to normal rhythm. So they end up leaving. And then they did a rapid response again because now it's cold blue. They did the CPR, they did the Lucas device. It went on for like 20 minutes. And by the time I came to within 20 minutes, I was in an induced coma for 48 hours because they didn't know if I was going to become a vegetable or not. And then I was finally being discharged on September 11th, 2019. Well, within 24 hours of being discharged, I had a stroke. So I had a stroke at home. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't swallow. And so I went to a different hospital. And also I ended up having E. coli. I was being treated for that. Finally went home after several days. Ended up getting a pacemaker December the 4th, 2019. And then a month later, I was laying in bed and I saw a lady getting CPR. Well, this triggered my event. This triggered the memory of the other side. It triggered so much emotional stuff like depression, anxiety, missing out on my 1-year-old walking her first birthday, missing out the first 5 months of the newborn, just all sorts of things. And so this led, what I remember, once the second rapid response that came in, and I was looking like, what's going on? You know, everybody was rushing in and I was surprised, and they were surprised that I was still alert. And then they left, and then the next rapid response, they rushed in again. So I looked surprised again, like, what's going on? And I believe the doctor knew what was about to happen, but she didn't want to make me nervous. And so she asked me, how was I feeling? And before I could respond, I like inhale a deep breath, and then it's like my breath like stopped. So it's like I flatlined like dang. And then I went to a separate place and I thought to myself, like, well, that's weird. My body is there, but I'm here. And then I said, I just died. I didn't mean to die because, for one, I had no warning signs. And I thought dying was, so much painful and everything. And I would know if I'm about to die. And I would just hear 1 minute and go the next. And so another reason was I was feeling better than I ever felt before, and I wasn't hungry, I wasn't thirsty, I wasn't tired. And then I was able to see so great because I'm actually legally blind. So by me being able to see very vividly, it alerted me that, I have passed on. So I had the awareness that I was leaving my children behind, but I also knew at this point things were out of my control. So initially, I went into darkness and I started to go through a tunnel, and then the tunnel was turning to light. And I remember seeing at the end of the tunnel, I can see a bright, bright light. And it wasn't a light that was like very, very heated and fire. It was more so piercing of love type of light. And in my background, seeing the light is like I'm about to meet Jesus because he's the truth and the light. And I also recall someone saying, well, don't go to the light. You're really going to be dead. But I had no choice to go to the light because that light pulled me very, very gently. And I felt the weight of leaving my body. My body felt so weighted. So I felt so light once I left the body. And then it's like that light was the eye of God. And like I was the apple of his eye. I was the only one that had his attention. And so it's like he reached in, pulled me out of darkness in the tunnel, and then was pulling me towards him very gently. And I remember hearing sound, futuristic sounds and instruments, and it wasn't too much with my ears. It was the sound was coming throughout my body. And then I remember seeing colors, futuristic colors, and everything to me was so miraculous, so amazing. I was mesmerized, really. And so once I finally made it to the light and light consumed me, I remember hearing prayers. I didn't know who was praying, but I knew those prayers was for me. So I know for sure that prayer reaches the ears of God. And so after I was hearing the prayers, and I actually saw some prayers too. I saw it in like maybe a text message form, but I really couldn't read it. It was just passing me. So I was passing the prayers. And so I was heading upward. And then I remember going into this garden. I would say it's also a valley. So it had like several other flowers, but it was one specific flower that was really pulsating and was interesting. And I can see the life of it from the stem up. And it just had my attention because it was like reddish lily flower. And so for me, that was my communication with God. That was my rebirth because I was so, so sick that I couldn't get healed on this side on earth. I had to go to heaven in order to get a form of healing that I needed in order to survive. And once I got the rebirth, I know that I didn't have a choice to stay. Although, if I had a choice to stay, I probably most likely would have stayed because I would want to come back to a world where there's stress and grief and loss and financial struggle. I would want to go to a place of peace beyond understanding. And so I was sent back into my physical body, and that's when I came to after 20 minutes. It didn't seem like 20 minutes, maybe earthside it did, but in heaven, it was no time. Like, I didn't know time was passing. Things were so fast. And I believe that the relative that I seen, it was like I just seen them, even though they've been gone for like many years, it was like I just seen them. And so that tells me that there was no notion of time. And then my experience was really, really amazing. And then where I'm at now, I actually have stage 2 congestive heart failure. Also had my gallbladder removed. But it reminds me that things are temporary. Even though I was healed once, that doesn't keep me from going through sickness again, but I know that on this side of life everything is temporary. Grief, loss, sadness, it's all a part of the body, but the spirit and the soul, once you go to heaven, you have no remembrance of that turmoil. It's all love and peace. And I remember that also when I was going through the tunnel, I felt the warmness of the light remind me the first time that I saw that being born, it was that type of warmness and love. And so, if I have to leave a message behind, I would say just love. God is love. If you have so much love within you, without a shadow of a doubt, you're going to heaven because there's nothing bad there. And love will get you through anything in life. And also by having faith, even as small as mustard seed, all you need is a little faith. Because when I was in a hospital, I was thinking to the point like things were looking so bad that I knew either I was going to die and go to heaven or I was going to go home not the way I came in. And so I had like this crazy belief that whatever happens, happens. I just want to leave this hospital. And so both things happened. I went to heaven where God really revealed unto me his love. And I then went home to my family. My experience on the other side is profound and it's something that I would never ever forget. And forever my life has changed. When I was getting the memory of the flashbacks, because they gave me something to wipe out that memory. But seeing that lady get CPR, that triggered everything. And then that led to me seeing a counselor, which also led to the book. So on December the 4th, 2019 is when I received a pacemaker. And about a month later, I saw a woman was getting CPR on television and that triggered my event. Early on, I didn't remember anything that took place because mentally I was just so sick. And I was told that they gave me something to wipe out the cardiac arrest. So that's the reason why I didn't remember. But seeing someone getting CPR, that triggered all my event of the other side as well as the cardiac arrest. And I fell into a deep depression, anxiety, and I started feeling that my dignity was gone, that I wasn't no longer a good mother. I missed out on that 1 year old birthday, her first steps, as well as the first 5 months of the newborn. And so my dad recommended that I go see a psychiatrist. And I didn't know much about it, but I'm like, Daddy, I'm not crazy. And so, but I opted into it because, I had no other options. And so I went to go see a counselor and a psychiatrist. And after several sessions, she recommended that I write a book for therapeutic healing as well as not staying stagnant because I needed ways to cope for the new life that I was now faced with. Because at this point, I became disabled, came without work, and I just needed some coping skills because I just couldn't get past that point of how this happened to me and why. And so that's how God Within the Lily was actually created. When I fell into a deep depression, my dad told me that I need to see a psychiatrist. And at this point, I was like, I'm not crazy, Daddy. I didn't know it's for the traumatized. But I opted in to see a counselor and psychiatrist. And after several sessions, the psychiatrist recommended that I write a book for therapeutic healing. And so that I went home to write a book, and that's how my book, God Within the Lily, was formed. And that's my story. And if you would like to get in contact with me, you can find my information in the description box below.